Welcome to G.I.Joe Chronicles, Outpost Edition.
I trust your mission was equally well executed.
I want a stone-cold righteous attention!
Militarily speaking, it's only fair to say that Cobra Commander is a world-class buffoon.
Welcome to G.I.Joe Chronicles, Outpost Episode 7. I am Jim Meal, also known as Jim the Joe Junkie. Over the course of this podcast, we intend to chronologically discuss the toys, comics, cartoons, and many other aspects of G.I. Joe, a real American hero, which is my favorite pop culture subject. Without getting too bogged down in the details, just my co-host and I having a conversation and reminiscing. And of course, that means I'm not alone. Joining me today is Jarrod Alberich, the art cell artist, also known as Death Probe. Thanks for returning once again to the Outpost, Jarrod, so that we can discuss another year of great action figures. And we've got a few people in the chat from our Patreon for Longbox Crusade, so thanks for checking in and chatting with us. So, Jarrod, what's the special mission you've been on lately?
Well, Jim, I'm glad you asked. Just yesterday, which was a Saturday, I went to a flea market not too far from my house, did some flea market rounds. And it doesn't pop up all too often to find any Joe stuff at my flea market. But I found, laying by himself on a table, in need of assistance, an original Lifeline. And so I threw Lifeline a lifeline, and I purchased this guy. There's a vendor I like to go to who specializes in action figures, and he kind of puts them in different groups on his table. And sitting by himself was Lifeline. And actually sitting next to him was Greedo from Star Wars. And I said, hey, how much do you want for Lifeline and Greedo? And he said, oh, how about $8? And I thought, it's a little higher than my cheapskateness wants to pay. But I thought, whatever. I'll support this guy. Yeah. So basically, I got these guys for $4 a piece. And like I said, it's a little higher than I like to pay. But it's a pretty good shape Lifeline. He's still pretty tight, no looseness. And Greedo's lost his antennas, but it's still Greedo. So that's my latest adventure.
In that case, we know who shot first.
Yeah. I think it was me.
For my secret special mission, we had, I guess you would call it our local Comic-Con called MuskeCon. Being from Muskegon, Michigan, they kind of played with the name a little bit. And all the local vendors were there. My brother and I set up and sold some stuff. It was just a great time with friends. We had to get together on Friday night. Also, since we're sharing toys that we got, somebody got the Vamp for the Classified series. And let me tell you what. It is amazing. So if you haven't got one yet, I would be looking for one. If you're in the Classified.
Oh, man. That's cool. I don't think I've seen a Classified Vamp laying around.
I just got mine Friday. And that's when most people were getting was Thursday, Friday. Some of the guys got them on Saturday while they were at the show. Anything else about your special mission?
No, man, that's about it. I just thought I'd make toy acquisition latest for this one.
I see Matt Passo's getting his Vamp delivered tomorrow. So as I've mentioned, on the last comic episode with Pat and Jarrod, who snuck himself in somehow, and also the cartoon episode with my brother George, it was suggested that we split each year of the toys comics into 2 episodes. What that means for the toy episodes is that we will be breaking each year up and covering the figures in the first episode, and then the next one with vehicles. But as I was getting my notes around for the 1984 figures, I realized that if we discuss the figures of 84, it would offset the toys in the comics. They would be talking about different years, and it would just be hard to track. And my mild case of OCD would be triggered, and I would be struggling each episode to try to remember what was going on. So this is going to be a one-off, or I guess a special episode. We're going to discuss the sub-teams of G.I. Joe, such as Tiger Force, Python Patrol, Battle Force 2000, and so on. For this episode, we are going to focus on the sub-teams up to and including 1989. At some point, we'll cover the sub-teams from 90 to 94, which there's a lot of sub-teams from 90 to 94. Had the DF, the Ninja Force, Eco Warriors, Sonic Fighters. And after thinking about it, there will probably be some of these one-offs here and there, because as we get into the comics of 86 and 87, Marvel is pumping out so many limited series, Tales of G.I. Joe, Digest, European missions, special missions, that is currently be covered on alternating episodes of G.I. Joe Chronicles with Pat and Jarrod. How's that going?
I don't really know. I haven't been paying attention. I don't know. It's been going good. We are currently working our way through, like you said, every other episode is a G.I. Joe special missions episode. And then the ones that aren't special missions is America's Elite. So we're kind of bouncing back and forth between the mid-2000s Devil's Due, which is how Joe Chronicles started. And then we're alternating now between the 80s special missions. We're really enjoying it. Fun fact for those of you, since you are joining us via the Patreon link, which we really appreciate those of you who've stopped by to say hello. A little peek behind the curtain is, I would say, G.I. Joe Chronicles is the show where we're always like ahead the most because we record 2 episodes back to back when we do record. We've got like 4 already ready to go. In fact, since you're special in the chat, we actually did an interview with Joe Casey, who was the writer on America's Elite. And so you can look forward to hearing from Joe Casey himself, the writer of those comics, in an upcoming episode. It's funny because we did the interview like, I don't know, a month and a half or 2 months ago. And I had to tell Mr. Casey, I was like, listen, we are so far ahead of these recordings. This ain't coming out till the summertime, man. And he was like, that's cool. He was a super, super nice guy. He even asked to come back on the show when his run ended so we could kind of discuss that. So like, he's very supportive of G.I. Joe Chronicles and a really nice guy. So look forward to hearing some more from Mr. Casey, probably in the summer, probably in the later summer, because we are so far ahead of our recording schedule. That was a heck of a lot more than you wanted to know, Jim. But hey, a little behind the scenes for our folks that joined us live today.
I've been recording long enough with you to know that anytime I give you the mic, there's always that chance that it's going to run right over. So
yeah, just get a sandwich, maybe something to drink, especially if Jason's involved.
All right. So with the introduction and the fine print out of the way, let's roll right into our first segment that we call That Figures.
There's Zartan! He's escaping in the chameleon! Let's go get him! Joe!
So we're going to discuss these sub-teams chronologically as they are introduced. We're going to cover the figures and the vehicles of these sub-teams, but I want to focus more on the theme, style, and overall aesthetic of the sub-team. And of course, memories that we have of the sub-teams when we were kids, when they came out, which ones we had, because we will be going into details when we discuss the associated year that the figures and vehicles were released in. This is just kind of an overview so that when those episodes do come up, we don't have to go into detail so much about the sub-team itself. After we discuss each sub-team, each of us will discuss our top 3 or 5 figures and vehicles of that sub-team. Depending on the size of the team, can be all figures or all vehicles or a combination of figures and vehicles. Then after we had covered all the sub-teams, we are going to each rank in order from least favorite to most favorite of the sub-teams that we have discussed today. And that was harder than I thought it'd be.
And I haven't even done it yet. So let me grab a pencil here.
All right. The first sub-team, whether Hasbro intended it to be or not, is going to be the Dreadnoks.
You got it! Dreadnoks! Torch! Ripper! And Buzzer!
They were introduced in the comics and the cartoons in 1984. Toys weren't introduced until 85, except for Zartan, which on his box art, he was not a Dreadnok. The initial team included Zartan, Buzzer, Ripper, and Torch. And their ranks would grow to include the following members. 1986, they introduced Zorana, Xandar, Monkey Wrench, and Thrasher. In 87, they introduced Zanzibar with his air skiff. And 88, they had Road Pig. And 1989 was Naugahyde. So some of their vehicles, Zartan had his Swamp Skier. Thrasher had his Thunder Machine. They had a Swamp Fire. And some Sears exclusives. The Dreadnok Air Assault set, which included a repaint of a Fang and a Skyhawk. And the Dreadnok Ground Assault, another Sears exclusive, which included a repaint of a Vamp and a Ram. Then the Dreadnok Cycle and Zanzibar's Air Skiff, both in 1987. So these guys were, really the best way to put it is biker gang, is the best way I would describe them. In the comics, I know that's how Larry used them quite a bit. So what kind of memories do you have about the Dreadnoks?
I just remember them sort of being the first wacky addition to G.I. Joe. Like, I liked it as a kid because I thought it was really creative, but it was so, we went from being a very militaristic toy line to, like you said, now we've added this biker gang, but it was unique and it was fun. And I think this is one of those times where the fun factor, a lot of it actually comes from the cartoon and a bit from the comic, But in this instance, which is rare for me because I wasn't into the cartoon a lot, not that I didn't like it. Again, I lived in Germany. I just didn't have it. But I would catch episodes here and there. It is really fun to watch the Dreadnoks destroy vehicles with the blowtorch and the sharp blade, and of course the chainsaw. It's fun to watch that kind of thing. So it felt like it added a bit of a Mad Max factor, if you will, to G.I. Joe. And they had unique looks, and they were a lot of fun. And one of my favorite things about the Dreadnoks, I don't know if we'll cover this again when it comes to toys or whatever. It's probably in your script, and I'm probably screwing you for later on or whatever. But like, I love the fact they couldn't get a handle on what accents they wanted to use for the longest time. Like, Larry had this plan where like one of them was going to be British and one of them was going to be like Australian, and one of them, like, and then they just kind of bled over into each other, and then the voice actors got involved, and it's like this hodgepodge of bizarre accents that are all sort of vaguely British Australian. And you know, what's not to love? So those are my initial thoughts on it, Jim.
On their file cards there, from one of them was, I think it was Buzzer, was actually from England, and some scholar. He's supposed to be some genius.
Right.
We'll discuss it on the actual figure episode about their Inkin, Blinkin, and Nod reference and the Tom, Dick, and Harry in their names. Because the three of them for Buzzer, Ripper, and Torch have names that link together. In the comics and the cartoons, they were used very similarly. Like you said, they were always destroying something or blowing something up or running away. I remember two very distinct comic books in the 30s that were almost identical. Took place in two different airfields. We'll cover those when we get to the 30s. I like them. You'll see as we rank them later down. They're not one of my favorite sub-teams, but they had a place. They were starting to get into that little bit unmilitary, like you said. Anything before you rank your top 5 Dreadnoks? Or do you want me to go first?
You go first because I got to rank mine.
You're still working on it?
Go ahead.
All right. My top 5 Dreadnoks. Number 5 Dreadnok figure or vehicle is the Swamp Fire, which was the helicopter that had the blades you could snap back that changed color in the sun. The Thunder Machine.
Thunder Machine. I know. My nickname in college.
Good to know. And I saw the chat that Matt Passo liked Zartan. He was number 1. Well, I've got him at number 3. Number 2 is Naugahyde, and my favorite is Xandar. He was my first Dreadnok figure that I ever got. There's a little bit of nostalgia attached to it. I just like his backstory of nobody ever sees him. In middle school and high school, I was kind of the kid that was always in the back of the room that nobody talked to, and kind of a little bit of link there. Those are my top 5.
All right, sir. I will jump in with my top 5. I would say at number 5, I'm going to go with Road Pig. I always like Road Pig with his cinder block on a stick. And at number 4, I will say Zanzibar and his air skiff. I thought he was a neat add-on. I just liked his look with an eye patch, and he had like a real hair ponytail on the figure, which was rare.
Yep.
That made him stand out. Number 3, I will say Xandar. I like Xandar quite a bit. Number 2, I will say Zorana. I thought she was a cool ad. One of those rare female figures. She totally works. And I was watching a movie. I might have tagged you in this on when I posted on X, but I was watching a movie. Was it Kill and Kill Again? I think that was the movie I was watching. It was an 80s Kung Fu movie. And I swear, like early 80s Kung Fu movie. And I swear that's where they got her design from, because there is a pink-haired lady who looks just like her in the movie. So, yeah, I liked her, the rare female figure with a really memorable design. And at number 1, I have to put in Zartan and his swamp skier. That was the first one I was given. I think it was, like you said, it's kind of before we knew Dreadnoks were a thing. It was sort of like Zartan and then the Dreadnoks, right? Kind of followed on. And I remember getting that for a birthday or something from, I believe, one of my aunts, and taking him outside and doing the chameleon sun change color thing. The little briefcase with or is it a backpack with a mask in it? We'll cover all that when we get to the figure stuff. Yeah, a little backpack with a mask in it. Like, what a cool, just a little small scale set that had a big impact. So yeah, those would be mine. And I have no problem going to the chat to say Matt Passo's favorite is Xandar. And he's very excited to see Xandar.
Yeah. I misread it as Zartan. So many Z's.
It's easy to get confused.
I love
Plus, Xandar is so easy to forget, right? That's his whole thing. His whole thing is everybody.
Easy, exactly. All right. So the next one is Special Mission Brazil.
Captain Claymore of G.I. Joe leads wetsuit, leatherneck, dial tone, and mainframe.
And this is probably the quickest repaint of figures that has ever been. This was a 5-figure Toys R Us exclusive, repainted 4 figures from 1986, and a new figure created for the set. This is also a cassette tape that included the Mission Brazil story. And there was another podcast, I don't remember which one it was, but they actually played and listened to the story that was on the cassette. I would not recommend it. Let's just say that. I wouldn't recommend listening
So,
to it.
Pat and I doing an Orsted bit is more entertaining than
Yeah. Yes, that was definitely more entertaining. It was pretty rough. Let's just put it that way. So the new figure that was created was Claymore. And I should have looked up to see what he was made up of, but he was, if here on the live, you can see he's the one on the bottom left on the screen there. And the figures that were repainted was wetsuit, leatherneck, mainframe, and dial tone. And really, there's not much more to talk about it. It was just a set that, like I said, they repainted 4 of the figures from that year and just put them in a set for Toys R Us. So
Now, Claymore would eventually get another version, if I'm not mistaken. You'll know better than me, but I feel like Claymore did get a foothold. Is that?
I don't think he got any in the vintage.
No, okay, not in the vintage. I think he may have come back in the 2000s.
Yes. He is in. Was he in the first run of the Devil's Due, or was he in
I think he did pop up.
I
at
think
some point in there.
When I was reading the Devil's Due and he came into the storyline, I'm like, who is this guy? I had no idea because this set was so rare back in 86, 80, all that time. I didn't even know he existed. So that's when I did some research and I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Where he came from. Again, that shows how much Devil's Due did their research.
Yeah, Claymore, Special Missions Brazil, man. I would have called him Cheetah Pants, but you know what's on the other side of the cassette?
No.
Nothing.
You?
Yeah, they actually advertised somewhere. They're like, you can use the other side to create your own adventure.
Oh, I do remember somebody saying that. Yes. Yes.
Like, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
use the other side to make your own adventure.
Yeah. Again, I didn't even know this existed until mid 2000s when I was reading the Devil's Due stuff. So this one, we're only going to do top 3 because there's not very many. We'd be pretty much just ranking the whole set if we did the top 5. In order for me would be Claymore because it's a newer figure, leatherneck, and wetsuit. I like the more almost realistic look of wetsuit.
I agree.
So what do you got for your top 3?
Probably exceptionally similar to yours. I wish I had paid attention to what you'd said now. I was looking at them now. I may only have 1 or 2 of these if I'm lucky. I don't think I've come across a lot of these, but I think your point about wetsuit is well made. I would say wetsuit's repaint might actually be an improvement over the original, like maybe, like, or at least on par with, because we do have a lot of love for the original. So I'm actually going to kind of go out of order here. I'm going to put wetsuit at number 1. At number 2, I'm going to put leatherneck because his repaint really feels like it's time to go to desert combat. When I was stateside in the military, I wore the standard green battle dress uniform or BDUs. And then when I got deployed to Iraq, I was issued the desert tan BDUs. And that's what that feels like. That's like a legit desert repaint. And then I'm just not big on that mainframe repaint. I think it's a big downgrade. Dial Towns feels like a little downgrade. So I guess I would have to go Claymore. So I guess our top 3s are going to be the same. Maybe not in the same order, but I would say number 1 is wetsuit, number 2 is leatherneck, and 3 is cheetah pants Claymore because he doesn't love cheetah pants. Dial Tone looks okay though. Like I don't hate on Dial Tone, but for some reason that mainframe, it doesn't do it for me.
I think it's the tan and the burgundy or whatever color that is. It just doesn't. It's not a good color combination.
Nah.
The next sub team is Battle Force 2000.
We're in real trouble here, Hawk. I'm calling in Battle Force 2000.
The walking, breathing proving grounds for tomorrow's battlefield technology today. Highly trained specialists entrusted with one-of-a-kind, state-of-the-art prototypes. Their mission? To support G.I. Joe and field test experimental equipment under battlefield conditions. This was one of the sub-teams that included new figures and vehicles instead of repainted figures and vehicles. But the vehicle drivers were sold separately from their designated vehicles. This one, as far as my memory, I remember seeing these and looking at them, looking at the vehicles, and then I'm like, where are the figures at? for the most part, those size vehicles. You had a figure, like the Ram, and the smaller ones didn't come with vehicles back then. The size of these vehicles, to me, should have come with figures, and they'd sold them separately. And at one point, they sold them as 2-packs also, not just single cards. I don't remember which came first, whether it was the 2-pack first or the single card, but the figures of this sub-team were Avalanche, Blaster, Blocker, Dodger, Knockdown, Maverick, and DJ, who was the only figure that was not released in 87. He was released in 1989. And then the vehicles were the Dominator, the Eliminator, the Marauder, the Skysweeper, Vector, the Vindicator, and the Pulverizer. And again, the only vehicle that was released in 1989 instead of 1987. I like that comment from Auburn Elvis.
Auburn Elvis says these guys look like Canadian G.I. Joes.
Yeah.
G.I. Joe, eh?
These figures and vehicles, I think, were a little ahead of their time. I know what they were trying to do. I understand what they were trying to do, being the future force. But I think if they were released in early 90s, they'd have got a lot more love than they do nowadays. Besides, the next ones we got coming up are probably the least favorite sub-team of most people, just because of the design and some of the colors and stuff. I don't hate them. I actually like this sub-team a little bit more than most people. So, Jarrod, you got anything on this memory-wise or fact-wise?
I don't have any fun facts. Just memory-wise, these guys are kind of lost to time a little bit. I feel like I own in my collection the two guys on the right, for those of you who are watching live, and I'll rely on Jim to tell me what their names are again. I think it's DJ is on the far right and Maverick is just to his left. I think, okay, I'm getting a thumbs up. Yeah, it's DJ and Maverick. Those are the two I'm pretty sure I own. I don't know if I own the other guys. Yeah, I fall in the line of I don't hate Battle Force 2000, but for some reason it just kind of glossed over. I feel like it really fit in best with the space shuttle, which was, what was that called? The Defiant? Is that right, Jim?
There was the big space shuttle, which was the Defiant. That was the one with the crawler. Right. They had the Crusader, which was a repaint of the smaller part of the shuttle, and they had the scout vehicle on top.
Speaking of Crusaders, if you want to get in on the super secret chat like the people who are on this recording right now, all you got to do is go to patreon.com/Longbox Crusade and join the Crusaders Club. I use that segue. Back to what we were talking about. All right. So Battle Force 2000 doesn't leave a big imprint on me. I only own a couple of the figures. They do feel like they fit nicely with the space shuttle style, sort of like getting G.I. Joe into space, but maybe it's because all their designs are slightly too similar. I mean, I appreciate DJ because, again, we get another minority character. We've talked before about how Joe is really good about mixing up all the different ethnic groups and stuff because it is very highly reminiscent of the military. And they continue to do that through the years, which is very cool. I think a lot of people look back at the 80s and say, they needed to have better diversity and all that stuff. But I'm always like, look at G.I. Joe, man. They were rocking and rolling, accurate to the military from day one. God bless Larry Hama and the good people at G.I. Joe. So I got to give a little nod to DJ, kind of tip my hat there about how I'm going to rank these. But yeah, overall, they feel just a little too generic. You know what? It just landed in my head. You know that other Joe company that Leonard, I think it was, that made like
the Core.
The Core,
yes.
In fact, we've just unlocked a memory from a couple months ago. In fact, whoever the guy is, second from the left on the screen, the guy is like an all green with the blue trim on his helmet.
That is Blaster.
I saw him laying at a table at the same flea market that I picked up a Lifeline at a couple months ago, and I thought he was a Core Leonard Joe. I picked him up, looked at him real quick, and went, that's not a real Joe. And I went about my business. And then as I was going about my business, I kind of looked up on my phone, and I went, oh, he is a real Joe. I went back to get him, and somebody had already bought him. But that is the whole problem with Battle Force 2000, is it looks like the Kmart brand knockoff Leonard versions of the Core. That's its biggest problem. I still like it, but that's Jarrod's 2 cents.
It's almost like, except for maybe, I want to say Knockdown, which is the third one from the right, and Maverick, I think you hit it a little bit. They're almost too common or bland for a future fighting force. But I almost glossed over it, and I can't believe I did. But the gimmick for this was if you got all the vehicles, one piece of their vehicle would create a future fortress. They all fit together. Do you remember that gimmick that they were trying to sell?
Not at all. No, that sounds really cool.
Oh, yeah.
Like a future, it's like a fortress you don't get today, but maybe tomorrow. That's why it's called the future.
Yeah, pretty much. And it wasn't, they didn't really fit together. I mean, I have all of the vehicles except for one. I put it together, and I've heard people do that. They just kind of set together. You don't lock them in. You don't do anything. You open one piece up, and then you just kind of put everything else in place. It doesn't really fit together or lock in like you think it would. That was one of the gimmicks they had. The vehicles, they were a little bit more futuristic looking, which was okay. If they were colored a little bit different, if they were just implemented into the regular line, I think it would have been a little bit more well accepted as well. Because there's nothing wrong with the vehicle design. I'm going to let you do your top 5 first this time.
Okay, all my 5 are going to be just based off of the figures, because I am not super familiar with the vehicle. Like, I'm vaguely familiar with figures, and I have almost no familiarity with the vehicles.
Okay,
so
makes sense.
I'm definitely going to say the 2 that I have, because they're most familiar with me, are got to be Maverick and DJ. Okay, so I've had Maverick and DJ for a long time in my figure collection. I immediately recognized them when they showed up. So that's number 1 and 2, Maverick and DJ. 3, 4, and 5 is dealer's choice. You can pick any figure you want. You can pick any vehicle you want. I just don't care. And that's how I feel about Battle Force 2000. Now, that my cynical response is over, Jim, give us a real response since you're much more learned. You own these vehicles. This is just a corner of G.I. Joe. And I'm starting to think, by the way, that these all came out when I was in Germany. And I'm feeling like this sub-team of vehicles and figures, I feel like the PX systems over there did not buy them because no one I knew had these. So I feel like this line wasn't carried. Like they were just carrying the main lines and not the sub line. And I think that's why this is a blank space in my memory. But over to you, Jim.
That's a good possibility. I can see where the PX wouldn't sell the little different vehicles.
Nobody I knew had them. And I want to, I'm sorry, I know you're about to go, but I want to pick up on a smart comment from Kathy in the chat. A reference, you were talking about building a fortress from the parts. She said trying to be like Transformers. I think you're absolutely right because they're having great success with the combiner Transformers. I think they tried to dash that into G.I. Joe a little bit here. But I'll let Jim speak to that. That's a good question, Kathy.
Kathy, I think so. But again, I think it would have worked better if they actually locked into each other instead of just
lean it against the other. You lean them against each other.
Kind of what it was. When this is released, watch the YouTube video. I'll have a picture on there, or just go Google search Battle Force 2000 Fortress, and you'll see what I mean. It just doesn't fit together well. For my top 5, I'm going to go with, I got a mixture of vehicles and figures. The Vector, which is the jet. I like the design, a little bit smaller aircraft. Figure Blocker, which is I believe, the one with the gray and the tan camo. And Knockdown, he was my very first Battle Force 2000 that I purchased. The Eliminator, which was the Jeep vehicle, and the Skysweeper, which was Knockdown's vehicle. So those are my top 5. Got some memory, got some nostalgia in there, and some design that I really like. Anything before we move on to the movie sub-teams?
No, let's get to something I actually know about.
We're going to discuss the movie sub-teams. We're putting the Slaughter Renegades and the Cobra La in the same group because I'm not a fan of these. So I want to get them over with as quick as I can.
I'll pick up the slack.
All right, good. These figures are from the animated G.I. Joe movie, which can be somewhat polarizing in the Joe community due to the inclusion of Cobra La. For me, I'm okay with how Cobra La was handled in the cartoons, and I have seen Cobra La handled well in the comics as well. Devil's Due included them in some of their G.I. Joe Transformers crossovers, but I don't want Cobra La in the Real American Hero Larry Hama storylines. And recently, Skybound now has the comic license, and they've introduced Cobra La into their Energon universe. But it's still too early for me to know if it'll work well for me or not. I'm one that I like to give it a chance, and if it doesn't work, then I'll just move on. I'll still buy this comic book because I'm a completist. I got to. So for the Slaughter's Renegades, we had 3. Mercer, Red Dog, and Taurus. And then for Cobra La, we have Globulus, Nemesis, Enforcer, and the Royal Guard. So, Jarrod, it sounds like you got a little more love for these than I do, so I'm going to let you talk about it a little bit.
Okay, I do have more love for this, I think, than most. And I think it really depends on how old you are. And if I remember correctly, Jim, I think you're just a couple years older than me, like just a couple.
Yeah, just one and a half, two, maybe somewhere around there. Yeah.
Something like, and I think it makes all the difference because my brother, the Weasel Skull, also has no time for Cobra Law. And I like it. I like Cobra Law. And I think it just happens because, when I saw the movie, got a little late because of the whole Germany thing, but it made its rounds. Obviously, G.I. Joe was huge. Military kids, we all wanted to see this movie. It started making its rounds on VHS. And I'm about 12 when I see it. So I think I have still enough of that young child mind to be open to stupid stuff. Like, I can admit it's stupid in the world of G.I. Joe. Like, I get it. And my brother was like, no, this is dumb. And I'm like, I think it's kind of fun. Like, a lot of kids my age, especially like Nemesis Enforcer. For those of you who are watching live, he's on the bottom left there. He's in purple. I think he actually has wings. Did he come with wings as a figure, Jim?
He did. He came with some wings. Yep.
Like bat style wings.
Yeah.
And I like how Globulus's tail is all posable with the wire inside. And then you have your regular troop. I was actually disappointed they didn't make the girl. There was a female Cobra Law and she had a real cool design as well. So I really, really enjoyed Cobra Law. I just thought it was neat that there was a whole different group of enemies to fight. And this time, all their weapons and stuff are very biologically based. It's a lot of super grown insects and it's all very biological and not so much tanks and jets and stuff. So it really puts a whole new sci-fi twist to everything. Never bothered me. I enjoyed it. I thought they were different enough that they were cool. My brother, the Weasel Skull, had no time for it. I just really feel like there's some sort of age divide, maybe about 2 years split where you just can't, you're like, no, this is just too far. And I get that. I really do get it. I don't judge anybody who doesn't like Cobra Law because I do get it. Personally, I liked Cobra Law. Meanwhile, I'm also a big fan of the Renegades. And if you go back and listen to G.I. Joe podcasts that we've done, I will mess this up all the time because I always refer to these guys as Slaughter's Marauders, which is its own team. We're going to get to that later. And I always mess it up because I always think of these guys as Slaughter's Marauders. I keep forgetting they're the Renegades. Again, kind of cool design. Sergeant Slaughter was super popular at the time. He was becoming very big in the WWE. They had his license over or WWF at the time. They had his license over on G.I. Joe. And so they're starting to build this little world around Sergeant Slaughter. Like, they're going to give him his own team. And I think they did it smartly. These guys come off as really tough guys with Red Dog and the Ford Taurus himself. But my standout guy, and I'm sure we'll talk about him more, is Mercer. I think Mercer's a really cool character because he's a former Cobra troop who has switched sides to join G.I. Joe. And even on his uniform, he has like a Cobra emblem with an X cross through it or an X out. I can't remember which one it is. That's kind of cool character building. So couple that with the fact that as you see it on the screen for those you're watching, they came in a 3-pack, like a giant peg with a 3-pack. And then just the packaging alone, we hadn't really seen much like that. I believe the Cobra Laws did the same thing. I think they came in a 3-pack. Just that different packaging alone, so different from what you're used to seeing with the single carded figure, made it exciting. There was just an excitement around it. So you take the excitement of the new packaging, you take the excitement of that movie, if you're young enough to enjoy it, and you all of a sudden you enjoy both Slaughter's Renegades and Cobra Law. And those are my thoughts. Back to you.
Matt Passo mentioned the lack of Pythona, the figure. If they would have made her, I could be swayed to like the figures a little bit better.
Yeah,
but I don't want anybody to think I don't like Cobra Law or the G.I. Joe movie. I love the movie. I'm not completely against the thought of how Cobra started, Cobra Commander being part of Cobra Law and then going out into the world. The figures, the follow-through, I think, is what really gets me with the figures. I like the concept of Cobra Law. I just don't like the figures as well as some people do. I think I have one Royal Guard in my collection, maybe a Nemesis Enforcer, and that's
no Globulus.
No, that's weird.
I have mine displayed with pride, sir.
Do you? I have
because
seen
he's so tall. He's like in the back right corner of my display case, just kind of sticking up like, hey.
I have seen people 3D print his whatever he wrote in the movie, put just half the figure on top of it. So that's pretty neat.
That's
I've seen that.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah. So again, I don't want anybody to think I hate it. I get it. I could do with or without it.
I gotta ask this question. Did I just make this up? Was Globulus voiced by Burgess Meredith, or did I make that up? He was?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
That was like a little trivia nugget rattling around the very back of my brain.
Yep. They had some big names in that movie. Oh, who did Lieutenant Falcon?
Don Johnson. I remember
Don Johnson. Yes, thank you. Like you were mentioning the Renegades. I absolutely loved how they used those three in the movie when they dropped Lieutenant Falcon off.
Yes.
And they were training him and roughing him up. The different personalities between the three. I really like how they use them. All right. Anything before we rate or share our top three? We're going to go with three because there's not very many. I'll go first on this one. Number 3 is Royal Guard, Taurus, and Mercer. I just like the idea of Mercer being a Cobra operative and coming over to the G.I. Joe team. That's my top 3.
All right, coming in at number 3 for me, I'm going to go with Globulus. I think I greatly reward different figures that stand out and are easily recognizable, and he's about as different as they get is in this 3 3/4 inch line. Number 2, I'm going Nemesis Enforcer. Like, he was just the coolest of the cool. When I was a kid, all of us would talk about, I think a lot of it had to do with his name, Nemesis Enforcer. It's like one of the coolest names ever. And my number 1, I got to give it to Mercer. I love a character that has a bit more background and a bit more depth. Sneak peek, everybody. We are going to be covering one of the new modern Skybound G.I. Joe comics for Crusade this year. Duke, number 1. And my man Mercer makes an appearance in that issue. And I was like, okay, I'm excited about this. So there you have it.
Yeah, I am liking the Energon Skybound universe that they're creating a little bit. With them starting out saying that Cobra Lao is part of the Energon universe and rolling into it, I think is helping that storyline for me personally. The next sub-team is Tiger Force.
Get those captured Cobra vehicles repainted and re-armed. They're part of Tiger Force now.
Tiger Force uses captured Cobra vehicles and retrofitted G.I. Joe weapons to battle the forces of evil. Each vehicle is specially modified and camouflaged for perilous assaults behind enemy lines. Released in 1988 to general retail, Tiger Force is one of the sub-teams that most people remember, consisting of repainted figures and vehicles. The figures and vehicles had a tiger or jungle camouflage of yellow, brown, and black. So the figures for Tiger Force was Bazooka, Duke, Dusty, Flint, Frostbite, Lifeline, Recondo, Roadblock, Tripwire, and Sky Striker, who is the only original figure similar to Claymore in the Special Mission Brazil. They call them LBC Customs. They just hodgepodge them together with different parts of other figures. And the vehicles were the Tiger Cat, which was a repainted Snowcat. The Tiger Fly was a repainted Dragonfly. Tiger Paw, repainted Cobra Ferret. The Tiger Rat, a repainted Cobra Rattler. Tiger Shark, repainted Water Moccasin. Tiger Fish, which was released in 89, was a repainted Devilfish. And a Tiger Sting, released in 89, which is a repainted Cobra Stinger. I know they were general release. Where I went and got my figures, Myers, I didn't see very many of them. I don't know if maybe because I wasn't like, what's that? Or they were that popular and people got them, or there weren't very many released. I do have a story similar to your, Jarrod. Was it Firefly?
Uh-oh. I absconded with Firefly.
Yes. I have a very similar story with Tripwire. It was not from a friend. This was one that I actually stole my original Tripwire from Myers. Yeah, that was not a good moment for me.
Oh, he's such a bad boy.
I hope my mom does not listen to this episode because she will be very disappointed. Yeah, so not good memories.
This was going to come out. We're going to get a message from Myers like tell Jim he owes us $3.
$3.14 because that's what they were at Myers.
He'll be by. He'll drop off $3.14 for you guys. Don't you worry if you Myers folks are listening. To the kid that I stole Firefly from his shed, you'll never see that again. In fact, I think that's the Firefly I still own, by the way.
It was not a good time for me.
Hey,
I
all
felt
you
really
kids out
bad,
there
though.
listening, don't shoplift, don't steal stuff.
Don't
It's
steal.
not good.
It's not good.
Jim and I both regret it. Makes for funny podcasting 40 years later, but we regret it now.
Yes. I really like most of these gears and vehicles. Some of the figures are a little wonky, but I like the concept. Back in the day, like I said, I didn't see very many of them. But now the vehicles I like a little more than the figures. But I'm a vehicle guy anyway. What's some of the better memories for you, Jarrod, than mine?
Well, I adore Tiger Force. For some reason, Tiger Force was a subset that was carried in our PX system, although I don't think they carried the larger vehicles, or maybe I was just too poor to notice, not even bother to look at the larger vehicles. But I really remember the figures, and then like the ferret and the devilfish. And then as I got older and I learned there were bigger vehicles and stuff involved, and those are super cool. I'm sitting here looking at the Dragonfly, or the Tigerfly, I think as it's called here, and that's just awesome. And the Rattler repaint is super cool. But I definitely dug these as a kid. I remember I did buy Flint off the shelf because Flint was always one of my favorites because he's a warrant officer, and my dad was a warrant officer, so we always liked Flint. That was like I think only Tiger Force that I bought off the shelf. But what a cool one. This was going to rate very high in my list of sub teams. It's just a lot of fun. And when you see it as a kid and you're like, oh, this is really cool. They got these tiger stripes on this Tiger Force, that's so cool. As a cynical adult, you just realize G.I. Joe was wildly popular. So they just put a little paint scheme on the stuff that they already had molds for and was like, here, buy it again, kids. And we were like, okay, we certainly will. And I regret nothing. Or steal it if you're some sort of rotten child.
Definitely a rotten child. I do want to say, as we get into these repaints a little bit, some of these figures that were originally released earlier, like Duke, Bazooka, Tripwire, 82, 83, 84 timeframes, some of these Tiger Force or these repaint figures are people's first versions of those because they couldn't find them retail before now. So some of these people like a lot better than the originals because of that. And yeah, you're right. Looking back now, you realize, they were just repainting and they didn't have to make new molds or anything. They didn't even upgrade, say, Tripwire or Duke, because those still had the swivel neck, not the ball neck. So they didn't even upgrade those. They just repainted and remolded them and went to town. I'll let you do your top 5 since I did my top 3 last time.
Oh, man, this is super tough. Okay, I'm going to go with the ones that I just have the strongest memories of. So at number 5, I'm going to say Lifeline. At some point came across Lifeline, Tiger Force. I had him. Number 4 is got to be that Ferret, because I think I had that one, the Tiger Paw, as it was known. Number 3, now that I'm looking at them, it's got to be Tigerfly, the repainted Dragonfly. Number 2 has got to be the Tiger Rat, the repainted Rattler. And my number 1 is the strongest memory I have, which is the Flint figure. That's the one I bought off the shelf, so it's going to be my number 1.
I figured the Tigerfly was going to be on your list somewhere.
I thought it was number 1. Behind the scenes, for those of you watching, especially in the live recording here for you Crusaders Club members, I was just kind of grabbing images off the internet so we could have stuff to show you guys if you were watching live, so you would be like, what the hell are they talking about? You would be totally lost. And when I found this image, I was like, look at that beautiful helicopter. And that's Flint, I think, standing right next to it at the nose. I think that's him. It's small and it's hard to see.
It's Ricondo.
Oh, it is Ricondo. Now that you mentioned it, I see the hat. I don't know where. Yep. I'll find Flint momentarily. You tell us what your top 5 are.
All right. So my top 5 is Sky Striker, the only original figure. Tiger Rat, which was the repainted Rattler. Tiger Fish, the repainted Devilfish, Ricondo, and the Tiger Cat, which was the repainted Snowcat. One of my favorite vehicles. So that's got to be number 1 for me. And I think I have 1.5 of those.
Nice.
So that's my top 5.
And I did find Flint. He's standing near the door of, I think, is the Vamp?
That's the Tiger Sting.
Oh, one of the cool things that I don't know that we stressed enough, and maybe you did, and I should listen to you more, though, is like the fact that you could take traditionally Cobra vehicles, and now they've been part of the Joe team. Like the Rattler was a Cobra vehicle, and the Ferret was a Cobra vehicle, and Stinger, I think, was too.
I was going to say something. The Tiger Sting, they call it Tiger Sting, which it could be the Stinger or the Vamp Mark II. I'm not sure because the weapons rack is off the Vamp Mark II, so I may have misspoke as far as the Stinger, but the Stinger and the Vamp Mark II, the hood is a little different. So I have to look at the hood and see what the mold actually is. The weapons rack is off the Vamp Mark II. Now we're going to move on to Night Force.
Cobra attack! Get the G.I. Joe hovercraft! Get the new Joes aboard!
G.I. Joe hovercraft holds 9 Joes.
Out of the inky blackness of moonless nights, they strike with surgical precision and pinpoint accuracy. They're members of Night Force, a highly specialized G.I. Joe commando unit that conducts nighttime sabotage missions against Cobra terrorist camps throughout the world. Night Force was a sub-team that were Toys R Us exclusives. The figures were repainted in darker tones than the original figures, and the vehicles were black and red with glow-in-the-dark decals. This sub-team had figures and vehicles released in both 1988 and 1989. So the 1988 figures were Crazy Legs, Lieutenant Falcon, Outback, Psych Out, Sneak Peek, and Tunnel Rat. And 1989 were Charbroil, Lightfoot, Muskrat, Repeater, Shockwave, Spearhead, and Max. And the vehicles, similar, they had 2 different release years. The first was the Night Blaster, which was a repainted Maggot, Night Raider, which was a repainted Triple T, Night Shade, a repainted Shark, Night Storm, repainted Persuader, Night Striker was the repainted Whale, Night Boomer, the repainted Sky Striker, Night Ray, repainted Moray, and Night Scrambler was a repainted APC. Again, these are something I did not know existed until, oh man, I might have known they were around in the early 90s, but I didn't start really trying to get them until, again, when I started recollecting. And by that time, they were so expensive that I have 1 and a few figures, and that's about it. But these are probably the hardest subset to get because of their exclusivity being from Toys R Us. And like you mentioned, there's some Joe vehicles and some Cobra vehicles that they reused. They used vehicles that you could see being used for the night ops. And the figures, every figure that they reused or repainted was an upgrade from their original figure as far as aesthetic and how they looked. Because there's some here that, as their original release, were kind of out there a little bit, but they repainted with Night Force and they were very good. For example, Psych Out. I'm a Psych Out fan, so I liked him, but when they repainted him, it kind of made him a little more legit. So, you got any memories or thoughts or anything on the Night Force?
I'm a lot like you. Like, I didn't really have much Night Force awareness until I think they'd sort of come and gone because Night Force was a Toys R Us thing. I'm living in Germany at this time, and we have no Toys R Us. So this is something I probably became aware of after we moved back, and then I probably saw some sort of weird repainted, what is this? And someone, oh, it's Night Force. And I was like, oh, okay, and I never kind of really thought about it much after that. Until a few years ago in my yard sailing adventures, I met this other guy who was out yard sailing, and we got to talking because he's my competition, I guess, because he's also looking for Joes, but he really specifically wants Night Force. And he's like, I'm looking for Joes, but I'm not really a big competitor for you because I let a lot of regular Joe stuff go. I really want Night Force. And I was like, okay. And he started showing me pictures of his Night Force collection. It's ridiculous. This dude has like 6 whales and a dozen Sky Strikers. Like, he just finds these over the years, and I've never found one at a yard sale in my life. But they certainly look cool, especially like you said, those vehicles are just kind of like done in black. A lot of them are like black with red trim, and it just looks really neat. And it's a cool line now that I know more about it. It's so rare and hard to come by. It was hard to find a picture to use for the live stream. Like, this was like the best picture I could find. It's just a handful of the figures. I couldn't find some really good Night Force. Like the last picture I put up of Tiger Force, we got to see a real broad view of that, but it was hard to find. So yeah, cool line, very cool, but I just don't come across them hardly ever. I would say I own maybe 3 or 4 Night Force figures that I've stumbled across in my years yard sailing, one of which is Muskrat. I do have him. I recognized him immediately, but that's about it.
Yeah, I'm similar to you. I don't come across them very often, just here and there. I like the original Psych Out as well, Matt. I actually, and we'll discuss it again when we get to 1987, but when that figure came out in 87, I guess you could say that was my first cosplay, because I actually made the backpack that Psych Out had out of wood and different things I found around my dad's garage. I'm with you, Matt. I like Psych Out as well. I just think the Night Force is just a little bit better. You want to go first? You want me to go first? I don't remember who did what.
Whatever. I'll just go.
Okay.
At number 5, I'm gonna go with Shockwave because he looks a lot like Beachhead, which I like, and I've always liked Shockwave. At number 4, I'll go with I like the night version of Outback. Outback is gets a cool redesign. At number 3, I will do my man Muskrat since I saw him and immediately recognized him. At number 2, let's go with the Night Boomer, the black version of the Sky Striker. At number 1 is the Night Striker, which is the black version of the Whale.
Yeah, we've got a few of the same ones. My top 5 is Psych Out. You think the way I was talking about, he's number 1, but this subgroup is so strong that he's number 5. Number 4 was a Night Boomer, like you said, the Sky Striker repaint. Shockwave, the Night Striker, the repainted Whale, and Lieutenant Falcon, one of my favorite figures. Now, I'm going to pull a Pat because there's just too many things in here not to at least mention. You mentioned Outback. He's good. Spearhead and Max, I think, was a definite upgrade with this repaint. And Night Ray, the repainted Moray. They didn't make my top 5, but they were right there close. I think they were improvements.
I really like on the Spearhead Max repaint how Max was the cat, right?
Yes.
They repainted the cat. Like he was an orange cat and now he's a black cat. Like they literally like put Max into dye. Okay.
All right. Next up, this is my favorite sub-team. It's the Iron Grenadiers.
Tired of the fanatical ravings of Cobra Commander and Serpentor, Destro goes in alone.
So Destro leads his fearless Iron Grenadiers into battle against Battle Force 2000. This is one of my favorites, if not number 1 sub-team. Back in 1988, I was drawn to the unique design of these black, red, and gold vehicles and figures. They all look like they belong together. Now, I mentioned Battle Force 2000 in the description. If you look on the box art for the Iron Grenadiers, they marketed it, Iron Grenadiers, as the enemies of Battle Force 2000. So this sub-team was the first one I thought, I can get on the ground floor and I can start collecting all these. And I bought them all. I had them all over time. It was the first one that I was able to complete, and just, I liked the way they all fit together, how Destro's Despoiler would mount on top of the Demon, and just the way they all fit together, the color scheme. Let's talk about the figures. The first one was Destro, Ferret, which was the Demon Driver, an Iron Grenadier, which is the General Trooper, Nullifier, which is the AGP pilot, Voltar, which was Destro's General, Annihilator, which came out in 89, had a backpack helicopter, Targat. Darklon was released in 1989. He was Destro's cousin. Wild Boar was the Razorback driver, and Undertow was released in 1990 as Destro's Frogman. So the vehicles of the Iron Grenadiers was the AGP, the Anti-Gravity Pod, Destro's Despoiler, the Demon, Darklon's Evader, Razorback, and the Dominator. And I forgot one figure that most people don't realize or think about, but in 1984, Scrap Iron on his file card is mentioned to be working with the Mars Corporation or Destro. So I give him an honorary seat at the table, I guess you could say, with the Iron Grenadiers as being the first one. What have you got on the Iron Grenadiers?
Well, again, it's going to be heavily influenced from living in Germany and the availability. I definitely bought the Destro that folks are seeing on screen that came with the spoiler, I think it was, yeah. And because he was super cool with that gold-plated mask and the red cape, and just great. And I think I had an Iron Grenadier regular soldier, and I think that's all they carried. Much like the Battle Force 2000 that they didn't carry in the PX system, I had never heard of any of these other vehicles. I'd never seen them. Any of the other figures I didn't know about. Only ones I ever knew about was Destro and then the actual Iron Grenadier soldier. Those are the ones I own today. I found a couple via yard sale. I know I got Targat and whatever his general's name was, Voltar, I think, got him as well. A lot of the figures I recognize just over time, but these vehicles pretty much new to me as we're discussing them here today. But overall, and here's a hint as to my number one, that Destro, that rebrand of Destro is magnificent. It's one of the best sequel figures I've ever seen.
Like I mentioned with the Tiger Force, this Destro was my first Destro that I could buy when I started collecting. Because I didn't start collecting until late 83, 84. So Destro I could never find him. So this Destro was my first Destro. Here's a hint too. It's going to be way up there on my list. The first comic I bought, or I got given to me to read, was the Python Patrol one. It was issue 88. So when I started reading comics, it was the gold-headed Destro, and of course I went back and read a bunch, but what was I going to bring up? Yeah, it'll come back to me. As you do your top 5, it'll come back to me. How about that?
Hope it comes back quick then, because my top 5 is at number 2 is Iron Grenadier, and at number 1 is Destro, because it's the only ones I really know. I mean, I could add a couple because like I said, I have Voltar, I have Targat, so I guess I could add those to my list. Don't know them really well, but like everything else is kind of a big blind spot to me. An old Dave Chappelle show joke. Here are my top 5 Iron Grenadiers: Destro, 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 and Destro.
So you're saying you like Destro?
I am. I'm a big fan of Scrap Iron as well. He's one of my favorite figures from when I was a kid. So since he's honorary, he gets tossed in the pile.
All right. I do remember what I was going to say. If you come in and you see my collection, you will see an entire shelf of nothing but Iron Grenadier vehicles and figures. I've got multiples of some of them. The AGP and the Demon. And Troop Builders, I've got multiple Iron Grenadiers, vintage, modern. Of the armory builders, this is the one that I armory build the most. So my top 5. Number 5 is the Demon, which is the big tank. Number 4 is Targat. Number 3 is Darklon. Number 2, AGP. And number 1 is Destro and his Despoiler.
I didn't realize how
anything else before
much there was. I didn't know there was this much.
Yeah. Yep. Well, they spread out. I mean, 88, you had the initial push, and then it spread out until 1990. They'd release one vehicle here, one vehicle, one figure, just a little bit for the next couple of years. All right. So the next one is Python Patrol.
Now I will crush G.I.Joe's Tiger Force! My Python experiment will make Cobra invincible!
Python Patrol is a select group of Cobra mercenaries that utilize high-tech, re-outfitted vehicles with sophisticated camouflage and venomous strikes against G.I. Joe. The Python Patrol uniforms and vehicles had a radar-resistant snake pattern. The vehicles had a little bit better uniformity to the pattern than the figures. The Python Patrol uniforms are kind of all over the place, in my opinion. They're very unique. You've got the dark Cobra Troopers, and then you have the bright yellow of the Crimson Guard. You got a Crimson Guard that's all yellow. Shouldn't it be a different color?
Not so crimson.
Then you got the not so Crimson Guard, yes. And then you've got Copperhead and the officer or trooper. I'm not sure which one that is. They kind of look alike. Overall, the uniformity isn't great on the figures, but the vehicles were a little bit better. So, the Python Patrol figures. You got Copperhead, Crimson Guard, Python Officer, Televiper, Python Trooper, and the Python Viper. For the vehicles, there were 3 of them. They had the Python Asp, the Python Conquest, and the Stun. I want to make sure I say Asp. Emphasize that P. I don't want a Dark Hawk moment. So this was 88. So this was a little bit later. Were you back in the States at that time? Did you see many of these or not?
No, we got back in 90. But Python Patrol, kind of like Tiger Force, it feels like they brought in a smattering, because some of this is very familiar and some of it, I would say basically the figures. I think they carried some of those, but not so much the vehicles. But I very closely in my mind associate Python Patrol with Tiger Force. It just kind of felt like they were on the shelves relatively at the same time. And they kind of felt like, okay, so they took Cobra vehicles and they made them into Joe stuff with Tiger Force, and they took Joe stuff and made it into Cobra stuff, for generally speaking, broad brush. And I always thought they were much like Tiger Force, thought they were cool. And much like Tiger Force, of course, as you get older, you realize they're just repainting and cashing in on no new molds, just reselling the same toys with a different paint job. But it's fun.
And I mentioned a little bit on the Iron Grenadiers. my first comic book was the issue where they introduced these, and just in Larry Hama fashion, the way he did it was kind of conceivable with the repaint and the different uniforms and stuff. So, and the vehicles, I've got Stun and the Asp, and I have yet to be willing to pay the price for the Python Conquest because that's a very sought after one. Even the Target re-release from the, I'll say late 2000s, 2010s is quite a bit also.
Yeah.
Too much for me. Great designs. You'll see as we go forward, it's up there on my list. So anything else before we rank them?
No, let's rank them.
All right. I'll go first. I'm going to go with Copperhead, number 5, the Python Televiper for number 4, the Python Stun, number 3, and the Python Conquest, number 2, and the Python Viper is my favorite of the Python Patrol. When they did the classified, I went a little crazy when I actually could find them in the store. Python Viper, I love the colors. What about you? What's your top 5?
Man, it's going to be similar to yours. I really like Copperhead and the Televiper, the regular Viper, the Stun, and the Conquest, or whatever they call it here. What do they call the Conquest? They call it the Conquest, the Python Conquest. So pretty much the same. You can jumble those order. I don't know if I did a great order there, but that's pretty much
It's
like
very
yours.
similar.
Yeah.
They didn't rethink the name very, very much. It's just Python Conquest.
Python Conquest, Python Stun, Python Ass.
Yeah. Not only were they lazy at just repainting figures, they just were lazy with the names too. We're down to one sub team. And this one, again, you mentioned earlier when you got it mixed up with Renegades. This is Slaughter's Marauders.
Slaughter's Marauders, camouflage, they can't be seen. But you better believe they're mean.
Heavily armored tanks serve as the spearhead in G.I. Joe's frontal assault against Cobra and the Iron Grenadier garrisons and strongholds. 3-color camouflage design enables them to successfully blend into a woodland or jungle environment when conducting offensive maneuvers behind enemy lines. Slaughter's Marauders do not look like they are from the same sub-team. The vehicles have a practical military look. The vehicles reuse bodies or what would be called shells nowadays from previous vehicles and are retrofitted with new or upgraded armament. The figures are repaints of previous figures, and they all have brown, light blue, dark green, and light blue repaints. The vehicles on these are great with the repaint and the upgraded armament, but the figures, I'm not sure what they were thinking with the figures. Again, I like them. They don't seem to fit the vehicles. The figures are Barbecue, Footloose, Lowlight, Mutt and Junkyard, and Sergeant Slaughter, of course. Oh, and Spirit. I almost forgot Spirit. The vehicles, they only had 3 of them. One was the Armadillo, which had the Armadillo base from, I believe, 1985. And then the Equalizer had the Mauler base, and the Lynx had the base from the Wolverine. And again, they all had different armament from the top of the base up. How familiar are you with these? Did you have anything back in the day with these?
Back in the day, I'm not so sure that I knew they existed, but what's weird is I must have heard the term because for my entire life, I've kept calling, Red Dog and Mercer and Taurus Slaughter's Marauders. So I must have had that term built into my brain. I'm looking back over the script. Maybe you can remember what year these came out. I don't see it in here.
1989.
89. Okay. So maybe they were still on shelves when I got back from Germany. Maybe I saw them there. I feel like this is definitely one where I found more than I probably should have in my yard sailing adventures over the last few years, because I have several of these in this version. I probably hit a yard sale where some kid had bought the series or whatever, because I think I have almost all of them. And yeah, they're a bit of a wonky repaint at first. I mean, they're still fun. They stand out as I'm getting at. And then, like you said, what's weird is they don't necessarily have the same vibe as their vehicles, but I applaud them for at least it's almost like they customed some vehicles. Like they didn't just repaint, they did sort of a halfway thing. And I think that's commendable, and it's still a neat line. And they're clearly still trying to cash in because Sergeant Slaughter is still very popular in the WWF. They really kind of caught him at that perfect arc of his popularity in his wrestling career and brought him into G.I. Joe at the right time. And we're able to rebrand for this once more. Let's sell it to the kids with a different paint job, and your mileage may vary on how much you enjoy the blue and green paint schemes, but I think they're fun.
Oh, they're definitely fun. And I was just thinking of something as we were looking at these. Does that blue look like, and I'm asking you as a military guy, similar to a UN color?
Yeah, the UN blue. Yeah, it's not far off. You're right.
Yep. So I wonder if kind of they were going for that maybe a little bit.
Maybe.
I don't know. I don't have any of these vehicles. I've got a couple of the figures, and I kick myself because not the show yesterday, but the last show I was sold at, there's a buddy of mine had the Equalizer, and he had a great price on it. I see it. I want it. Let me see how I do at the show. And if it's still here, that whole thing, like I got to make some money before I spend some money type thing. I try to stick to that.
I can relate.
Unfortunately, I saw somebody walking by my booth with it in his hand, and it wasn't my buddy. It was somebody bought it from him. I was kicking myself because I should have picked it up, but it'll come up again. These figures, again, they're fun. I understand them. Again, a different era. These were used in the DIC cartoons, the first miniseries, or the only miniseries for DIC, Operation Dragonfire. They used these figures and these vehicles in that miniseries. All right. My top 5 is going to be Barbecue, Mutton Junkyard, the Lynx, which is the one with the Wolverine base, the Armadillo, and the Equalizer, which has got the Mauler base.
I much like some of these other sub teams that wasn't carried in the PX so much. I'm definitely not as familiar with the vehicles, so I'm going to stick with the figures. Plus, those are the ones I own. So I would say at number 5, I'm going to go Sergeant Slaughter himself. At number 4, I would say Mutton Junkyard. Number 3, Barbecue. Number 2 is Spirit. And number 1, I really like this repaint for Lowlight. Lowlight's original figure is dang near perfect, but this is a fun repaint for him, so I like it a lot.
I find it odd that they repainted Lowlight in the Slaughter's Marauders and not the Night Force, where he would have been utilized a little bit better, but
makes a lot more sense to give him like an all-black outfit, maybe with like a little ghillie suit accessory you could hang over him or something. That would make more sense.
But
am I crazy, or does he? Oh, I see his gun with a scope now, but I was like, he's got an Uzi and not a scoped weapon, but it's in the picture on the bottom right.
Yeah. Before we go into ranking of these 9 sub-teams, is there anything you want to discuss about any of them before we go into it? Anything we missed? Or you ready to roll into the ranking of all the sub-teams?
I guess I'm ready for rankings. I just didn't realize there was this many. When you were like, let's do sub-teams, I was like, okay, Tiger Force, Python Patrol. I'm there.
Yeah.
The little did I know there was much more.
And like I mentioned at the beginning, Sky Patrol was in 90. That was the silver vehicles.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then you get into the DEF and the EcoForce, the Ninja Force. We'll discuss those on our next opportunity when we have some non-overlaying between the comics and the figures.
There's more of this to come, folks.
Yeah. Good or bad, I don't know. All right. I'm going to go first, ranking all these so that you have a little more opportunity to work on your list there, Jarrod. So now we've covered all the sub-teams from 82 to 89. Let's each rank our least favorite to our most favorite. And to recap, these are the ones that we covered today. The Dreadnoks, Special Missions Brazil, Battle Force 2000, Movie Sub-Team, Tiger Force, Night Force, Iron Grenadiers, Python Patrol, and Slaughter's Marauders. I'm going to go from number 9 to number 1. And my number 9 is the Movie Sub-Team. 8 is Special Missions Brazil. 7, the Dreadnoks. 6, Battle Force 2000. 5, Slaughter's Marauders. 4, Tiger Force. 3, Night Force. 2, Python Patrol. And number 1, Iron Grenadiers. So, Jarrod, what do you got?
All right. I'm going to lay out a rule that I'm going to immediately break. All right. As I'm about to say, I'm going to give a good amount of reward to figures that are new figures and not repaints. So that'll factor highly in. Having said that, at number 9 is Battle Force 2000, which are all new figures, but they're all too generic for me to truly enjoy. At number 8, and this is going to break your heart, I'm going to go with the Iron Grenadiers. They just weren't as advertised where I was, although it killed me to put them at 8 because that Destro is perfect. At number 7, Special Missions Brazil. At number 6, Slaughter's Marauders. At number 5 is Night Force. Number 4 is the G.I. Joe movie series. Number 3 is Python Patrol. Number 2 is Tiger Force. And I gave number 1 to the Dreadnoks since they were very new and original. That's where it starts to make sense. So I lied immediately off the top. But yeah, I mean, at the end, like deep down in my heart, I think my favorite sub-team is probably Tiger Force. But I had to recognize the fact that at least Dreadnoks were new characters, adding a whole lot. I mean, they added a lot to the comic lore and the cartoon lore. I just love the look of Tiger Force, and it's the one I remember most as a kid. So there you have it.
That's why we do this. I find it also when I'm doing the cartoon episodes with my brother. I've watched those episodes over and over and over, and he's just going back and revisiting them. So his view is a lot different than what mine is. So at different experiences, different locations when they were released, like with you, it's interesting to talk to people about that stuff. Just 1 or 2 years difference too.
Yeah,
with stuff. So
like with the movie, just being a little older, you're like, this is, I got no time for this crap. So, and it's understandable because Cobra Law is weird.
It's out there. All right. So listeners, let us know what your favorite sub teams are. And more specifically, some of your favorite individual figures and vehicles from what we discussed today. Share those on Facebook, X, YouTube, wherever you're listening to this. So, Jarrod, any closing thoughts on anything we discussed today?
Yeah, I want to read a comment from Matt Passo in the super secret chat, and I think it's really well said. Matt says that's the best part of the fandom, differences that we can chat about without tearing each other down for what we like. And I absolutely agree. I have no beef with what your favorite sub teams are. And I think we really learned today that it is really based off your lens of experience. I lived in a place where we didn't get all this stuff. The internet phrase, I was today years old. I was practically today years old. Like when I was putting these pictures together for this live stream, when I realized the amount of Iron Grenadier vehicles, I thought it was a handful of figures. I didn't know there was like this library of vehicles, So yeah, different perspectives. And I really think that's well said, Matt. And if you want to be like Matt or Kathy, who's also been in the secret chat, and I think Auburn Elvis stopped by, just remember, Longbox Crusade over on patreon.com for as little as $1 a month. You can get on the secret recording sessions, but I'll probably advertise that again in a minute. But yeah, well said, Matt. And I'm glad you stopped by.
Yeah, I agree. Nowadays, I collect to be part of a group of people that like all toys, not just G.I. Joe, but toys in general. Now everybody collects the same thing. I am friends with people that like Transformers. I'm not sure why, but I am.
Those weirdos.
I know, right? But that's probably my second. Mask is probably my second choice, and then Transformers. Ooh. But anyway, no, everybody's got their favorite thing, and we can just because you don't like the cartoon doesn't mean you can't talk about it with other people and have conversation. And Cobra Law is one of those. Is it my favorite? No, but I like it. It's part of it. You can't forget about it. So yeah, good point, Matt. So in closing, thank you for joining Jarrod and myself, especially those in the chat, on this episode of G.I. Joe Outpost. Jarrod, thank you for spending time discussing these sub-teams. And if our listeners want to contact you, where can they find you?
Well, my friend, I am at Yard Sale Artist on X, Facebook, Instagram, or you can check out my artwares at www.theyardsaleartist.com. I believe I'm up to 24 officially different characters from G.I. Joe that I've drawn on pages of military manuals. So if that's something that excites you, definitely check out www.theyardsaleartist.com. Or better yet, if you decide, hey, I need all 24 of these and you want me to save you some coin, contact me at Yard Sale Artist on X or Facebook or Instagram, and I'll give you a bit better of a deal than you can get on the website.
I have one of those. You did Lieutenant Falcon for me, and it's
that's right. Jim's got an original at his house. He's special.
That's right next to the one that Larry Hama did for me. So that's where I think. Ooh, yeah. And you can find me on Facebook as Jim Miel, JIMMIEL, and also on Facebook, Timbers, Toys, and Customs, where I post some of the shows I'm going to be at with what I'm selling, some customs I do, and just kind of what's out there. I'll be posting some pictures of the vamp that I got today, just because it's pretty sweet. I want to thank everyone at the Longbox Crusade Network for adding G.I. Joe Outpost to their extensive line of shows. Take a listen to all the other shows that are on the Longbox Crusade on any podcatcher or on YouTube. And if you like what you hear, go to Patreon, become a Crusader Club member, where you get all the access, like Kathy and Matt, and I believe Auburn Elvis was on here as well. Literally all the access, more access than you want sometimes.
Some people pay for less access. Like, I'll up my Patreon amount if you give me less access.
Join us next time where we will be discussing the comic book issues from Marvel, issues 14 through 19. These 6 issues, there are some big storylines that play out. And if you thought there was a lot going on in the previous 6 issues we discussed, get ready to be blown away. Some of these characters literally get blown away. I'm not sure if that's insensitive or not, but it's the truth. So, until next time, Jarrod.
Yo, Joe.
Yo, Joe.
The music themes for this show are done by musical genius Joe November. Please check out his SoundCloud at Josephline99. That's Josephline99. You will not regret it.